Hey everybody, Chris here with the Storage Investor Show. Today I have Jake Gusso, the co-founder of RigHut, a technology company offering property management software that's purpose-built for semi-truck parking applications. He spent most of his career in the commercial real estate business, where he's brokered over 100 million of real estate transactions in South Florida. He also owned and operated income-producing properties in the Midwest, representing 125,000 square feet of commercial space. He is focused on building RigHut into the premier provider of truck parking software, helping landlords automate and scale their truck parking operations throughout the country. Jake, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Chris. Thanks for having me.
Awesome, man. Appreciate you being here. Let's talk real quick about RigHut and a little bit about your background. We'll come back to the commercial space. I'm interested in hearing more about that. But let's jump into RigHut right away. Can you give us an overview of what RigHut is and your services?
Yeah, so think of RigHut as purpose-built property management software for semi-truck parking facilities, right? So what the application does is automates inventory management for semi-truck parking operators. It's got a built-in invoicing, billing, and payment system. It's got built-in what we call driver relationship management tools, which is internal communications within the facility between landlord or operator and the driver, status communications, updates to the facility, discounts, things like that. And we basically try to make the lives of operators a lot easier. You'll find if you talk to a couple different operators in the semi-truck parking space, there's not a lot of software available that's tailored for parking applications and the short-term nature of semi-truck parking specifically. So basically, our goal is to help operators operate their businesses in a more efficient manner and scale to multiple facilities if possible to help ease the strain on truck parking that exists today.
Okay, perfect. So you guys are basically, you're just a software, and I don't say that in a negative way, but you are a software provider to the owners of the spaces, the parking spaces, basically. So you're like your property management software, like Yardi Breeze or Store Edge in the storage space, that sort of thing. Is that the idea?
Exactly. A lot of our customers that do use software
Okay.
actually use those two pieces of software that they repurpose for truck parking, Yardi Breeze and some of the storable products. But you're 100% correct.
Okay, perfect. I'm curious, when did you guys start the company?
You want the long answer or the short answer?
Here, give me the long answer. It's always interesting to hear the story. So yeah, when did you guys start?
RigHut's gone through a few different iterations, but I'll give you the story of how we got here. We were originally looking at truck parking and outdoor storage from the lens of a real estate operator. The short version of that part of the story. The first thing we did was we built what was a third-party management company for truck parking facilities. So we were literally going out knocking on doors in 2021, trying to convince semi-truck parking operators to basically let us manage the facilities on their behalf, where we were actually boots on the ground, showing drivers where to park, sending DocuSign license agreements, invoices through QuickBooks, and tracking inventory on Excel. And we built that up down here in Miami and Broward counties, which is just north of that. My co-founder, Jose, has got a background in tech. He's built and sold a couple of software companies. And we just saw this gap where we could build a solution for the problems that we were having in the management business, if that makes sense. So we started managing those yards in 2021, right? Started building the technology stack in early 2022. The first version of the functionality that we built was a simple payment solution. So we were just facilitating the transaction between driver and landlord, which got us off the ground. And then slowly we've been building the back end for parking operators to manage the facilities, right? So we layered in the inventory management, we layered in some invoicing, we layered in some communication tools, and now that's become the core offering of RigHut. That made
Okay, so yeah, absolutely. So back to the 2021 situation. So you guys like literally were knocking, like you said, you're knocking on doors, quote unquote, to manage the locations for these guys. What made you want to I guess, do that? What kind of goes off in your mind saying, hey, we should do this. We should call these guys or stop by and manage their lots,
we
their
wanted to
yards.
we wanted to learn the business, specifically truck parking, right? We saw the writing on the wall back then in terms of basically rates. We saw rates going straight up into the right. From a fundamental perspective, especially down here in South Florida, we're a very land constrained market to begin with, right? Got the Atlantic on the east side, we've got the Everglades on the west side. All the municipalities down here are fairly against most industrial uses. They're typically very against approving truck parking uses that aren't already in existence. We basically wanted to learn the business to buy, build, own, and operate our own yards. And the way that we thought we could learn the fastest was convincing other guys to let us manage their facilities and basically feed us to the wolves and learn the hard way. And we leveraged a lot of our past experience in terms of other real estate applications, but that was the original idea. We just wanted to learn the business.
So how the heck did you convince somebody to let you do that if you had no real prior experience?
We got thrown out of more yards than I can count, but the first guy that gave us a shot was a Romanian gentleman out of Broward County whose his primary business is diesel distribution. I don't know exactly how that business works, but essentially what he described to us is he's a broker, right? So he's buying fuel out of the terminal and he's selling it to the retail providers. Prior to that, he actually had his own transportation company where he was also hauling the fuel. He sold that business and he had 3 facilities. Well, actually, at the time, he only had 1 that we could actually use. And he had this vacant land, and we saw that he had parked a couple of units on it, and it was a really nice looking facility. And we literally just rolled into his gate. We followed a truck that was going in there. We tailgated him, knocked on the trailer door, and he was there. And after a couple of different meetings, convincing him and him beating us up on our management fee, he gave us an opportunity. And he's still a customer to this day. We converted him to the software model. He was our first guy ever.
Wow, that's pretty amazing. So that's how I was going to ask you guys how you got your first really 10 customers or made your first $100. And that's really it. You guys were persistent and not giving up. I guess that comes from maybe the broker days back to your previous role. But I want to ask so fast forward, how many locations do you guys have now after a couple of years in the business?
Today, I just checked before we got on here, we're up to 111.
Holy smokes. That's amazing.
Thank you.
So 111, and where are these located? Across the country or
Throughout
Southeast
the country,
or what?
throughout the country, our first sort of enterprise grade client that gave us an opportunity on the software side was based in the Northeast. He's out of Jersey. So that gave us some density up there that we were able to leverage to gain more facilities up there. But we're pretty much nationwide. There's some gaps in the map. I'd say our densest presence is up there, Northeast, Jersey, Port Newark, South Florida, Atlanta. We're starting to get some facilities in the Southwest, West Coast, Phoenix, LA. Major port markets is like where we're getting the most activity. I don't know if there's necessarily rhyme or reason to that, but that's where we are today.
That's interesting. So major port activity, wherever that is, I'm trying to think off the top of my head. Do you guys have anything? I live in Charlotte. Do you have anything in Charlotte just yet or not yet?
I don't believe we have anything in Charlotte. I think we've got a couple on in Savannah, might be the closest to you.
Okay, sweet. That makes a lot of sense, being right there on the coast.
Yeah.
That makes a ton of sense. Okay, what strategy, how did you find, so obviously you're located there in Miami and you went to places locally. How in the heck did you scale then from, I'm assuming the first few were more local, correct me if I'm wrong, and then how did you end up scaling to the next 20 or whatever in different states and elsewhere? Did you guys fly in and knock on doors or was it word of mouth? What'd that look like?
Also very hard. The short answer is yes. We literally flew all around the country. If anyone would say, hey, I want to meet with you, we would get on a plane and go meet them in their office or their trailer or their yard, their house, wherever. It didn't matter. Back then, right, when we
Okay.
first launched the first version of the technology, which was 2022, was almost impossible to find these facilities online, right? If you go on Google right now and go to a map search and search truck parking and just fly around the country and hit redo search in this area, you're going to find pins. Back in 2022, there was 0. I think there were like 3 or 4 operators that had an online presence. So literally scanned satellite imagery manually, flying on Google Earth, saying, hey, this is the truck parking yard, drop a pin on it, put the address, figure out who the owner is, cold call him. And whenever we got a positive response, okay, can you meet me tomorrow? We're on a plane.
Wow. So I've done that before with storage facilities, which is a lot easier to do. You just type in self-storage and they pop up and you're trying to sort for the mom and pop ones, the small ones, but that's a lot of work. I don't want to say a whole lot. That's just a ton of work to do that. And then to get potentially rejected after you do all that work because it's a numbers game. And so maybe whatever the numbers look like, I'm not sure, but 1 in 10, 1 in 20, 1 in 50, that can be very disheartening. Now, did you and Jose do that together at first? Did you hire some help later on or what did that look like?
Originally, it was all us. I call my co-founder Jose, I call him the hammer because I have yet to see a door that he cannot get through. He can get a hold of literally anyone in the world. I won't name drop anybody specific, but literally anyone in the world that we wanted to get in touch with, he gets us in front of them somehow. So originally it was us two. We would pretty much go everywhere together. We even got in the car and drove all the way up to South Carolina ourselves, stopping at yards up the way and down the way as we came across them. And then we started outsourcing some of our marketing. We have a guy that we're very happy with that kind of handles our outbound marketing in a digital sense. Now we're leveraging some cold calling solutions. We do a lot of cold calling ourselves still. We have a sales guy based out of Charleston, and then we have our engineering team.
That's amazing, man. So you guys have built it out, bootstrapped it in a sense. Have you guys brought on any investors for this, or is it all bootstrapped?
We did. So when we launched the first version of technology in 2022, that was all bootstrapped. That was all us. Got us off the ground. We ended up bumping into our current capital partners who have been amazing. The name of their company is Risk Ventures. They're essentially a family office, right? And it's an operating company, right? So they've got 3 different verticals. One is real estate, the other one is technology, and the third would be healthcare, where they buy, grow, and operate different businesses themselves. They build out the infrastructure. They put up a lot of the money themselves. And they had this iOS fund named Blacktop, who the founder there is Ricardo Cardoso. And somehow we got in touch with him. Ricardo flew down to Palm Beach and we did a tour. We showed him some yards that were using our software and we hit it off. And Ricardo put us in touch with Risk Ventures. And about a year after that, we had finally signed up a deal with them, and they've been an amazing partner.
That's amazing. I actually have heard of them because I think they launched a fund, and it was mentioned in 2021 or 22 or something like that, to do storage, if I'm not mistaken. But they're based out of New York. Is that right?
They're based out of New York. You're referring to Sfarebox? Self-storage?
Yeah, that's what it was. Yeah, because it may have a joint venture or something like that. I just remember it's RISZ or RISKZ or something like that, Ventures. I just remember going to their website
RIZK.
when I heard about it.
So they have
All right, that's it.
that was another kind of piece of the deal that made sense for a lot of us, right? They have a company named Sparebox Self-Storage, which buys, owns, and operates self-storage facilities in secondary and tertiary markets. And the kind of claim to fame there was they built 100% unmanned model using technology that they built themselves. So there's a lot of similarities, right? If you're looking at self-storage and outdoor storage, specifically truck parking. So it's a natural fit given their experience in the self-storage space to work together on the truck parking side.
Yeah, that makes a ton of sense. And I know those guys came from Red Dot, and they went out and did their own thing, and they've been very successful ever since. I want to try and get them on the podcast, so we could talk about that. But
Yeah, for sure.
I'm back to Rig Hut, and what you're in 100 locations. Are there any markets that you won't go to for any particular reason, or is it just based upon the operator and the user, really? Because that doesn't really matter, right, as far as markets are concerned?
For us, the market is not really a concern, right? I would say the customers that find the most utility out of Rig Hut are either multi-facility operators or operators that have a single yard with more than 50 or 60 individual parking spaces. Less than that, you can get away with the invoicing on QuickBooks and taking Zelle payments and keeping track of it in Excel for the most part, right? But by way of example, our 2 largest customers, each of them park over 1,000 trucks on their facilities. There's no way those guys are going to manage that entire operation if they don't have a purpose-built piece of software. And those are the guys that we have. We're able to prove value really fast. And so back to your original question, no, we're market agnostic, right? As long as there's a prospect or a customer that we believe we can add value to, we're going to find them.
Okay, that makes a ton of sense. That's good. 'Cause you're a software provider. I was going to ask you, like, what kind of is the cutoff for the ideal user or customer, and you just mentioned it was roughly 50 units or 50 spaces or less. Are you able to integrate this? I guess probably the answer is no, but I would assume that unless you have more than 50 parking spaces, it wouldn't make sense to integrate this into your storage operations. You could probably just use existing, like, purpose-built self-storage software. Is that right? If you want to identify, analyze, and invest in the best self-storage deals out there, then you need quality data. Tract IQ provides accurate, transparent, and vital information for over 57,000 self-storage facilities and 4,000 storage development sites. What sets Tract IQ apart is their comprehensive data on 70,000 residential and 200,000 commercial construction projects across the U.S., along with traffic counts, flood zone maps, and much more. See why the most sophisticated investors in the industry use Tract IQ for their underwriting. Visit tractiq.com/Chris, Kris, to book a demo today and save 10% on your subscription. The link is in the description below. Tract IQ. Analyze more deals with more confidence.
If you have a self-storage facility, so we bumped into this a couple of times. Most self-storage operators typically don't have enough leftover land to build a truck parking facility where you're going to get economies of scale. I may be wrong, but I don't think we have any live customers right now that are operating truck parking on a self-storage facility. I could be wrong on that. And we can't
Okay,
integrate
got it.
with other pieces of storage software right now. That's not to say we won't in the future, but right now, no.
Do you guys do anything on the marketing front? Let's say a guy or gal has like whatever, 500 spaces. Do you guys, I know like Storable, they try to integrate a bunch of different pieces of technology into all in one solution. Is that kind of the direction you guys are going, or do you guys do anything on the marketing side for owners to help them out? Or is that just not yet, or maybe in the works?
It is in the works. So we do highlight facilities, right? And we've got a pretty big user base, right? In terms of drivers. And we have a newsletter and we're on Twitter and all the socials highlighting different facilities that come online and where they're located and the different amenities that they provide. The core functionality, again, is a software for the landlords to operate the facility, not necessarily the marketing, but they will get some traffic through our website as they find parking, as they search for parking facility.
Okay, got it. And you mentioned amenities. That's one question I had is what do people, honestly, I don't know. This is a whole new world for me, but there is some overlap there with storage. So I'm curious, what sort of amenities do truck drivers and yard owners, what do they provide and what do they look for?
It depends on the use case and the landlord and your market. So if you simplify truck parking into two different durations, there's overnight truck parking, which is your guy going over the road from point A to point B, and he needs somewhere to stop overnight somewhere in between those 2 points, right? That guy is more like a hotel guest, right? Because he's staying with you. He needs to be able to get out of his truck, preferably get something to eat. He needs a bathroom. If you've got showers, great. If he can refuel his truck with you, even better, right? So those are more of the Love's, Flying J, Pilot, Travel Centers of America type operations. And there's some local and regional players trying to enter that overnight truck parking space as well, where you have to have some amenities, right, to retain that driver, attract them to the facility overnight. Aside from overnight parking, we've got monthly truck parking, right, which is very popular in land constrained markets like Miami. So that same over the road truck driver, most likely, if he's out of Miami, he's going to pay for parking at home on a monthly basis because he needs to know that space is available when he gets back from his route. On those facilities, you don't really need a ton of amenities, right? Because the truck been dropped, or he's coming up in his personal vehicle, dropping the personal vehicle, getting in the truck, running his route, comes back, drops the truck, gets in the personal vehicle, goes home, right? He's not staying with it. It's more of a storage facility as opposed to a service facility, if that makes sense. So on those, depending on where you are, there's some yards down here in Miami that are dirt with a fence. I don't recommend that. But most of our yards are either an aggregate compacted surface or asphalt with a fence, lighting, and camera. No bathrooms, no mechanical work, right? No service facilities, no diesel, none of that.
Okay, that's interesting. So I didn't realize it segments into two types of customers, which makes a lot of sense. In the storage facility situation, you probably wouldn't want an overnight person, obviously. You wouldn't be able to provide the amenities necessary, but yeah, and then you would have the space. So that makes a lot of sense. I'm thinking through some of our, as you're talking, I'm like, I wonder if we could put some here, put some there, and all that. So maybe we'll be in touch after this one. You never know. But I'm curious to know what makes an ideal, when I go back to the owners of the yards, like what's an ideal customer for you guys? I know obviously size is important, number of spaces, of course, but what's an ideal customer look like?
Yeah, so size would probably be number one, right? Either a portfolio operator or a single yard that's more than 50 spaces, right? Obviously multi-tenant. We haven't really discussed this yet, but there's different buckets of outdoor storage, right? And you've got traditional net lease IOS where you've got JB Hunt or Ryder or Amazon, and they come in and sign a net lease. They occupy 100% of your property or a vast majority of your property. We cater to multi-tenant managed parking facilities where you need a system to operate, unless you want to be sitting in a trailer at your gate checking everybody in and out. But there's a better way to do that. And that's generally it. Multi-tenant, scaled parking facilities anywhere in the country.
Interesting. Okay. And is there to use the service, is Rig Hut to use that, is there as like a monthly contract or excuse me, a monthly fee or is there an annual contract? What does that look like?
Yeah, it's 100% fixed monthly flat fee. It starts at $249 a month, and there's no transaction fees on the landlord side, right? We're not taking a percentage of your revenue. We want you guys to have a fixed cost, know what it's going to cost you, drive your revenue, mitigate your expenses, right? And provide a lot more upside to those landlords.
Oh, that's great, man. That seems pretty reasonable. On the back to real quick, the partnership that you guys have. We mentioned briefly, maybe expanding into some marketing or whatever. Who knows how that looks because things can change. But what's the bigger picture, maybe 2, 3, 4, 5 years out? Like what other things do you plan on adding and expanding Rig Hut into?
We've got a pretty wide roadmap in terms of features and functionality, but the end goal is to be the dominant player in truck parking software, right? Think of Storable for self-storage. I don't know if this is true, but online they've got supposedly 85% market share of the self-storage software market, right? And they have that captive. I see truck parking and outdoor storage on a similar lens as self-storage looked a decade ago or 15 years ago. It's still very fragmented, regional operators, mom and pop style operators, where you see this wave coming on. Or if you're thinking about like a baseball game, for example, I say we're in the first, if not the second inning. We want to be the dominant player in that space, right? We provide a lot of value. It's a unique offering, right? There's not a lot of people chasing this style of business, and we can really help a lot of these operators scale as the business evolves and institutionalizes.
That's great, man. What are some of the, are there any other competitors out there to you guys or what does that look like?
That we know of competing in the truck parking software space, there's only one right now. Most of, like on our outbound, right? If we run into a prospect that's using software to run his yard, it's most likely either self-storage software or apartment software that's being repurposed and stitched together with something else to manage his parking facility. But it's still very early. I'm sure we're going to see a bunch of new entrants in this space, but right now, to my knowledge, it's us and one other guy.
Wow. So you guys might have some sort of first mover advantage depending on the size of the market and all of that. So that's pretty cool being on the front end of that stuff. That's awesome, man. I think we covered a lot of ground there. Let's jump into the final 3 questions and then we'll wrap everything up here. So real quick, what's a career highlight for you? What's a high point in your career and what did you learn from that?
The high points are tough for my brain to, identify, but the most fulfilling part of my career is certainly launching Rig Hut, right? Everything I've done prior to this has been on the service business where you're relying on your own performance, right? You're the sole proprietor and eat what you kill. And if you don't eat, you don't kill, right? Rig Hut is the first opportunity that I've stumbled across where Jose and I saw an opportunity to really build something that could scale, impact a lot of people, and we could really build a team where everyone moves towards a common goal, right? And we've done that successfully at this point, and that's probably the most fulfilling high point of my career for sure.
That's amazing, man. I'm curious, did anybody say that you guys are nuts for trying to do something like
Yeah.
this or kind of poo it a little bit?
People still do that.
Tell them to shut up, mind their own business, go do something else. So, what's been a career challenge for you? Like maybe a low point in your career, not to make you depressed or anything when you think
Yeah.
about it, but what's a low point and what did you learn from it?
Yeah, those are much easier for my brain to identify. I thought about that question, and so we didn't go into a whole bunch of detail, but basically I had this transition. When I first left college, I was working I was essentially a property manager where I was fed to the wolves, so to speak, and I learned a lot really fast. And I was both managing and leasing in-house for a local guy, portfolio of retail shopping centers and apartments. And I liked the transaction gig, right? I've always enjoyed transactions, making deals. So I left that company and I went into full-time brokerage. And as I was entering that business, I said, man, this is going to be really easy. All I've got to do is convince a bunch of landlords to let me do what I did for this guy. Little did I know at that age, the commercial real estate sales cycle is incredibly long and it takes a long time to spin that flywheel of business up. So my first year in full-time brokerage, the firm that I was with helped me and they gave me this deal in Miami that was a 100,000 square foot office building of executive suites. So think 50 to 100 square foot offices, $25 a foot, the annual rents, whatever, $2,000 more or less. But I did 86 transactions that year, and my take home pay was $21,000 and change. Meanwhile,
Oh,
I
oh
was
my gosh.
basically living my life on a credit card, right? So you can imagine what happened there. I was basically stressed out of my mind that I didn't know how I was going to be able to live, but that was definitely the lowest point of my career. I was like, man, if I can figure out how to get out of this, I can pretty much, I don't want to say conquer anything, but it was definitely a huge learning
Conquer
experience.
the
And
world.
yeah,
Right.
it gave me a lot of grit. It showed me the value of having cash in the bank, and it showed me the value of being patient in things that take time, especially in something like commercial real estate. Like there's things just take time. You're never going to meet someone and transact with them on the first occasion. Very rarely. I look at everything now from a sort of long-term game. Nothing is viewed from a quick transaction perspective. And it's because of that year. That was a long-winded answer.
That's amazing, man. Yeah, those tough times like that. No, that's actually important for a lot of people to hear. Some people want to get into brokerage and they want to go do maybe other things and they don't realize that in this space, it does take a little while to get where you want to go, but the payoff is worth it, I think, in the end. I was listening to, I don't know if you ever heard the podcast, My First Million. I just started listening to it maybe 2 months ago or something. And they recently had a interview with, I forgot his name exactly, but it's like the Indian Warren Buffett
Monish.
is how they titled it. And yeah, Monish, yes, he has a book out. So I looked him up and all that. But I've been listening to the interview, almost finished it today. But he said when he started, he was working for a company and he said, okay, I can go start my own thing. Long story short, I can go start my own thing. Here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to do just enough to not get fired, but obviously do enough to not excel and become promoted, to get more work. And then I'm going to get as many credit cards as possible and leverage myself to start my own business. And that's exactly what he did. And his downside protection was I can file bankruptcy if it doesn't work out and then go back to work. So he was going, that's what he was going to do. And it worked out for him. Thank God it worked out for him. But that was what you said reminded me of that. And I think a lot of real estate guys and gals get into the business and doing the same thing, take a lot of risk on that front end. But hey, worst that can happen, if you don't have any kids or a wife, whatever, you can sleep on someone's couch.
Yeah.
And always get a job somewhere. So
Just keep
that's great,
trying.
man. Last thing, that's it, man. That's it. Sometimes you got to try a couple things, maybe fail, and then you'll find out what works for you. Last question here. Can you recommend a business resource? Could be a book, could be a person, could be a conference, whatever, that you would recommend for the listeners.
I'm going to get a lot of flack for this, but I'm going to say it anyways. I love sales. I like sales process. Grant Cardone was the first guy that I found in that space when I was much younger, and I basically absorbed all of his material over the years. I think that's a good starting point if you're interested in sales. The guy's a master marketer, TBD, whether or not he's got everything he talks about. But when I was younger, I really liked Grant's stuff. I like a guy named Alex Hormozy primarily because he just tells you to shut up and work, which resonates really well with me. Those are probably the two that I would highlight that were impacted my frame of mind when I was a little bit younger.
Hey, man, you know what? Those are influential guys, whether you like them or not. Now I'm not as much of a Grant Cardone fan, but I completely get what you're saying about his stuff because it is extremely motivating. I used to watch a lot of Gary Vee,
Yeah.
Gary Vaynerchuk as well, and he's extremely motivating. Maybe don't agree with all his advice, whatever. I find that he is a little bit not quite as deep on the actionable items. Like when somebody asks him, how do I do this? And he's just saying, just post, just 10 times a day, 12, give your 180. And it's okay, what else can I do? And I like Justin, she's a good one, who gives you actually actionable stuff that you can do online. His take is totally different. He writes and does a newsletter and all that stuff. So his is different. He's out on video, except for interviews. But yeah, I agree, man. Those guys are great guys. Sometimes we need them in a season in our life, and some people just love them and become super fans. So that's awesome. I appreciate it, man. I think we covered a lot of ground, Jake. Thank you so much for being on. How can people reach out to you if they want to partner with you, use your software, maybe invest for the future, just make a connection? How can they reach out?
I'd say the best way is probably to reach us on Twitter. That's going to be the fastest response. We're always on there. It's at truckpark_king.
I will put that in the show notes. Jake, thank you so much for being on.
Thank you, Chris.